I didn't think it was our best album at the time, and I still don't.
What? Did you hear the other two albums, Steve? Hello, and welcome to Maiden Voyages, a podcast dedicated to deep diving into the discography of Iron Maiden. We're your hosts. As ever, I'm joined by Blev, a historian of sorts and a self-described Iron Maiden superfan. And I'm Sam, a writer of sorts and someone who spends far too much time thinking about Iron Maiden nowadays. This week, we're on part 3 of our seemingly never-ending analysis of the band's third album, Number of the Beast. If you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2, we highly recommend doing so before delving into today's episode. Let's get into it.
So, it's a shame, really, isn't it? Because usually now we'd go on to look at the singles, 2 great singles, but we have a new section.
Dun dun dun!
A new feature. It's the exciting new feature I've called Lawsuit.
I thought you were going to come up with a more puntastic name than just Lawsuit.
No, Lawsuit, brackets, legal shitstorm.
At least go with like breaking the law.
Breaking the law.
Or something. I know it's priest.
So,
just 3 out of 10. I want more effort.
Sorry. I'll work on it. We'll come back to it next week.
If you're going to rename my Fact Check Pedant's Corner, you're going to have to come up with pithy names
I was
for your own
pushed for
bits.
time, Sam, okay?
All right.
It's Lawsuit.
Let's
now,
talk about the Lawsuit.
Hallowed Be Thy Name is a classic Iron Maiden song and was regarded as such for years, indeed still is, but its reputation has been a bit sullied lately. And it begins with a band called Beckett, who appeared last episode when we learnt that Terry Slessor, the lead singer of Beckett, had auditioned for Maiden. Maiden turned him down. What did you know about Beckett before going into this? I mean, did the name mean anything to you at all?
Not really, other than I knew, probably because you mentioned that Maiden at some point had covered one of their songs.
Yeah, and I think...
Oh, and actually in one episode, I think you mentioned that they played together at some point.
I may well have done. I don't remember saying that. But
maybe
possibly.
I've made that up.
Maybe.
All these rock bands just blur into one at a certain point.
But to be fair, I think for most people, if they did know Beckett, it was largely because they'd been sort of endorsed by Iron Maiden, right? Because they were a rock band, well, a prog band, really, I think is a fairer description, from Newcastle, formed in 1970. They put out one self-titled album in 1974. They disbanded shortly after. That's about it. It's one of those albums that largely sinks without a trace, doesn't leave much of a legacy or a footprint. They're just another British prog band who never quite failed to make it.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate a prog band coming out of Newcastle? That feels oddly specific.
Well, yes, specifically because Newcastle would go on to be like quite a big centre of the new wave of British heavy metal, but that makes more sense, right? Venom and Raven, like Newcastle. I don't know, sorry people from Newcastle, but I think of you as lovely people, but quite macho, kind of working class, rough and ready kind of city. Lovely city.
That is such a sweeping generalisation.
It's quite a sweeping generalisation.
But then the one time I went to Newcastle, I got started on. So,
I mean, I had a lovely time the 2 times I've been to Newcastle. But
I did not have a lovely time.
When you walk around Newcastle, it doesn't scream prog in the way that like Canterbury does. You know, the Canterbury scene. Or,
I was about to ask, does anywhere scream prog? Canterbury. Yeah, that tracks.
Glastonbury.
Yeah.
The Woods. General.
Space,
yeah. Mars, the moon. But yeah, so Beckett were a band who came and went without a trace, but they did have one fan who would go on to some acclaim, who was Steve Harris.
Stevie Harris.
Yeah, little Stevie Harris was a big old Beckett fan. Now, these are the facts as we know them. Okay. He had seen Beckett live.
Yeah.
He liked their album.
Yeah.
Rod Smallwood, the plot thickens, Rod Smallwood also acted as Beckett's agent.
Okay.
The word used as agent, quite what that means, like not necessarily manager, but he was like the band's agent.
Like booking gigs for them.
Booking gigs for them, yeah. Because before he started with Maiden, Rod Smallwood had worked with, was it Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel, we said? And, he'd had a sort of kind of burgeoning career as a kind of agent stroke manager. And Maiden went on to cover a Beckett song, a B-side slightly later in this decade. They covered the song Rainbow's Gold.
Right.
Which I've miswritten here as Rainbow's Golf.
Now that's a prog song I want to hear.
Yeah.
Prog epic dedicated to golf.
Rainbow Golf. So, in a way, it's Maiden who are kind of keeping the memory of Beckett alive at all, really, in the 1980s.
Yeah,
because everyone else had forgotten them. As far as I'm aware, that album was out of print for years, if not decades. It may well be back in print now. Let's look at the lyrics to a song from that debut Beckett album called Life Shadow.
Sure.
Okay, but I believe it's track 4 on the album.
When your time is close at hand, maybe then you'll understand. Life down there is just a strange.
That song's lyrics go, "Mark my words, my soul lives on. Please don't worry, 'cause I've gone beyond to see the truth. While I consider my youth, when your time is close at hand, maybe then you'll understand. Life down there is just a strange illusion."
I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? That sounds oddly...
very familiar for a band I've never listened to.
Yeah, weird, because nobody's really heard of this band, and that sounds oddly familiar. Oh, but let's look at some of the lyrics to Hallowed Be Thy Name from Iron Maiden.
When you know that your time is close at hand, maybe then you'll begin to understand. Life down there is just a strange illusion.
Mark my words, believe my soul lives on. Don't worry now that I have gone. I've gone beyond to seek the truth. When you know that your time is close at hand, maybe then you'll begin to understand. Life down here is just a strange illusion.
I mean, there's not even a tweak to those lyrics.
Barely. I mean, it is...
There is a small grammatical change, but for the most part, Steve has just lifted that wholesale from the Beckett track.
That is almost close to a verse's worth of lyrics, isn't it?
Yeah.
That are identical.
It's not just... I mean, plenty of bands will cop a phrase or something from another song.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just kind of part and parcel of the natural production of any cultural art form. Like, there's nothing new under the sun and everything's influenced by everything else. But to just steal a verse is pretty blatant.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Life Shadow is also about a man condemned to death. So
those are the thematic areas identical.
So exactly. That you can't really dispute the fact that Maiden have plagiarized those lyrics.
Yeah. So presumably at the time this was noted. I mean, I guess you've just said Beckett weren't particularly known.
Well, I think that's it.
Surely someone in Beckett was like, wait a second.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But being an Iron Maiden fan, a big Iron Maiden fan who went beyond, I'd say even the most nerdy, in terms of digging deep into stuff, reading everything I could find about the band, I never heard this mentioned. When the internet became a thing, there were the odd comments on forums about it, but it wasn't really publicly acknowledged. And it's odd that this is not an issue, seemingly, until 2017.
Okay.
So we are talking a considerable distance from the year this came out,
about
1982.
35 years afterwards.
Yeah.
I've probably done the maths wrong. Something like that. A while.
Rather odd, right?
Yeah.
But basically, in 2017, the Beckett songwriter and guitar player, I believe, Brian Ingham, and their manager, Barry McKay. Don't know. Let's call him McKay.
Let's.
Yeah, but Barry McKay is a slightly shadowy figure in this story.
And shadowy how?
Well,
just walk into a room wearing a robe.
Shadowy in the sense that why does a band that haven't released an album since 1974 or played live have a manager? What is he managing?
That is a valid question.
What work is there for a manager of a band who split up in the mid-70s? And as far as I'm aware, apologies, they may well have done the one-off reunion gig here and there or something, but have essentially just not existed for decades.
There's definitely not enough there to necessitate a manager.
No, it seems like you could probably manage that yourself, right? Yeah. But anyway, in 2017, they sued Iron Maiden for copyright infringement over 2 popular songs. I use the word 2 popular songs here, Hallowed Be Thy Name and The Nomad, from Brave New World.
One of those is popular.
Yeah, I dispute how popular The Nomad is amongst Iron Maiden fans. But anyway, which lifted musical sections and lyrics from the song Life Shadow. Harris and Dave Murray, now this is where it does get a little bit strange.
Yeah.
Harris and Dave Murray had previously settled, as in financially, with one of the credited songwriters of Life Shadow, Robert Barton. So that didn't go to court. There were no legal proceedings. It seems like they paid him off, basically, the other credited songwriter of Life Shadow.
Okay.
So he'd been paid off, Robert Barton, and according to Harris and Dave Murray, they were under the impression that he wrote the lyrics in question.
Right.
So as far as they were concerned, he'd had his money, he was happy with what he got, the matter's resolved. Ingham, though, was unaware, so the other songwriter of Beckett, Ingham, was unaware of this until 2011, and Barton claimed to be the sole songwriter doing the original settlement, but Ingham disputed this. Iron Maiden therefore stopped performing Hallowed Be Thy Name on their 2017 tour as a result.
Wow.
And I do remember, it was the Book of Souls tour, I believe, when I saw them in Cardiff. And I've seen Maiden, 10 plus times? The only time I've not seen them play Hallowed Be Thy Name.
Yeah.
But they then settled out of court in March 2018.
Wow.
Now,
Okay.
we'll get to the settlement in a minute, but I appreciate this can seem well, I don't know, I think this is fascinating stuff. But if this seems a bit dry...
Let's hope the listeners think the same.
Well, you made nerds, obviously. This is what you're here for, right? But, it's worth... I've tried to edit this as judiciously as I can. Here's Iron Maiden's response. We do not believe that Brian Quinn was the one who wrote those 6 lines in question over 40 years ago, as was claimed by Barry McKay, the manager. However, due to escalating legal costs and the potential huge costs of a court case, it was pragmatic to reluctantly settle this action with McKay for £100,000. A fraction, Maiden said, of what he brought the action for. They then go on to say, bit of a burn to Brian McKay here, a serial litigant like Mr. McKay would have foreseen this initially. So they're essentially saying he's he's tried this on before with other bands.
Is he sort of someone who raises a lot of nuisance law
I
cases?
can't find much about him. I mean, he certainly threatened Maiden with other things that have not seemed to have transpired.
Right.
But apparently Harris and Murray were ordered to pay £900,000 initially.
Okay.
And they say they settled for £100,000.
That's quite a drop.
Yeah, it is quite a drop. But Barry McKay, who perhaps isn't the most reliable narrator here, has a different version of events. Yeah. And of course, because this is settled out of court, the paper trail isn't there, right? So we're never going to know. Barry McKay said, this entire matter brought about by copyright theft has cost Harris and Murray a total of £900,000 in damages and legal costs. So Barry McKay claims they paid the full whack, close to £1 million, for lifting 2 verses of lyrics verbatim for Hallowed Be Thy Name, as well as copying music which they used in the Iron Maiden song The Nomad. 18 years after the release of the Number of the Beast album, which contained Hallowed Be Thy Name. So he's basically saying they paid the full whack. It's, if you want to dig further into it, the full statement from Barry McKay's online, and it's kind of wild. It's sort of like the allegations he makes about Steve Harris. He basically goes through Steve Harris's defense. Steve Harris says, A, he didn't realize what he was doing was wrong. And he actually, I think, cited the fact that he quoted, Coleridge and Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. And said, it's like, but that was hundreds of years old, mate. There is copyright law.
That was probably in the public domain. Yeah, and also, there's a difference between very clearly referencing a literary work versus passing something off as your own. Yeah. I don't think anyone thought, Iron Maiden wrote Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
Wow. Yeah, that's impressive. Like a classic work of romantic poetry.
They've been around for so long. They really are a dinosaur band.
But Brian McKay also takes issue with the fact Steve Harris has said that it was originally a placeholder lyric. They were up against the clock. He meant to change it. Right. They didn't have time to make the edits. That sounds plausible because they were up against the clock, right? The album came out late as it was. Yeah. Because it was meant to be mixed. I mean, it's not a defense, but it sounds to me like probably
it's not
the
a defense because it's going to take a few hours to re-record those lines max, right? Yeah.
But, it was an oversight. They had other things on. They just didn't think, whatever. Steve Harris has also been on record as saying that if a song is solely credited to me, i.e. Harris, I write everything. Yeah. Okay, so he says he writes the drum pattern, the riffs, the vocal melody, the lyrics, will even give guidance on guitar solos. And patently, that is not the case here. Yeah. Is it? So the matter's settled now. I was going to say everyone seems happy. Barry McKay doesn't seem particularly happy and has well, I was about to say threatened, has mentioned that there are other instances of plagiarism in the Iron Maiden back catalogue that he will potentially be pursuing in a legal manner.
I mean, that definitely sounds like a nuisance litigant. But in settling the dispute, have the songwriting credits changed at all to reflect it?
Not that I'm aware, no.
Right.
No, I believe it is still just credited to Harris.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, they didn't get that out of it. They got their money and they cut their losses. I mean, how much money they got? Like you said, there's quite a big difference between 100k and 900k.
Yeah.
I mean, you are Iron Maiden, right? So both of those figures are, not insignificant, but aren't going to massively damage your business. I mean, 900k for Maiden's about 4 festival dates, right? If probably fewer than that. It's about 3 festival dates, and they've made that money back in the summer. So it's
of course, but then it's not like they play festival dates at a loss. They've got to pay for crew, they've got to pay for travel, they've got to pay salaries for lots of people and pyro and all that jazz. I just think there's something interesting about McKay claiming it's 900k and Maiden claiming it's 100k, because if it is 100k, then whilst it's certainly a sizable amount of money, that's going to, 2 people, the manager and the one remaining member of Beckett.
Yeah.
So it's a good salary for a year, but it's not life-changing money.
No.
Versus 900k split between 2 or whatever is potentially a life-changing amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. What do we think? What do we make of it then? Because who's and we know what the answer is. It's somewhere in the middle, isn't it? But who's in the right? Who's in the wrong here?
Yeah, it's certainly not black and white. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer in any capacity, much to my father's chagrin.
Sam, one of the finest legal minds of his generation, is finally going to settle this dispute once and for all.
I mean, yeah, obviously, Steve is sort of in the wrong. Well, demonstrably in the wrong in that he's just copied these lyrics and passed them off as his own. Considering that he was under the impression that someone else in Beckett wrote the lyrics and they had paid him off. For all we know, Steve Harris had a conversation with this person at some point, but like, hey, sort of used your lyrics. Do you mind? And they were like, fine.
Funnily enough, that is sort of what the Maiden camp have implied.
Yeah. And I could totally see that happening, particularly with Beckett being inactive.
Sorry, excuse that subtle opening of the can there.
But yeah, particularly with Beckett being inactive and Maiden being a sort of champion of theirs, having recorded a cover of theirs later on, I could definitely see them just having had a gentleman's agreement about it. But obviously that's not really legally binding. And it's probably relatively telling that the lawsuit doesn't come to fruition until 2017, like at least starts brewing in 2011. So long after the fact that the song's been out and has been one of their biggest songs. So whilst, yes, Steve Harris is probably and definitely in the wrong on some level, I also suspect there's an aspect of the story that's just never really been communicated. Because why would it be?
Yeah, I mean, at best, from Steve's point of view, it's naive. At best. And it's possible. He was a very young guy at the time, right?
Write it down, Steve.
This. Yeah,
First thing I learned in my career is arse covering emails.
Yes, exactly.
I sent at least 3 today.
If only he'd had a covering email. That's all he needed before email was really a thing.
Well, okay, whatever they used in the 80s, papyrus, parchment paper, like whatever.
Chiseled stone.
Send a fax, Steve.
But you're right. There is something about the timing of this, the time that's passed since the song's come out, that makes it feel, again, quite opportunistic from the Beckett point of view. And I get it. They've not had a successful music career. I mean, people like money. So, if you think...
Really deep.
And also, it feels to me that 2017, this was a time where a lot of those stories were making the press, weren't they? There were quite a few things.
You had like the Joe Satriani and Coldplay musicology lawsuit, where Joe Satriani was claiming Coldplay with the song Vida La Vida or something terrible like that, ripped off Joe's Hatch song.
I mean, that is mad. I mean, as if Coldplay have ever listened to Joe Satriani.
I just really, really doubt Chris Martin said, like, you know what I really like? 80s wank guitar.
Yeah, for a man like Joe Satriani who knows a lot about music, that is an absurd thing to try and claim, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the melodies were identical, but there's also only so many notes in the pantheon of music. So,
but I was also thinking, this is probably a bit later, but there was the quite high-profile Ed Sheeran one, wasn't there?
What was the Ed Sheeran one?
The Marvin Gaye estate brought a successful legal action for that Ed Sheeran song. Oh, God. This is not a Maiden podcast song. I can't discuss.
I thought the Marvin Gaye one was related to Blurred Lines by Robin Thicke.
Oh, there was that, but there was definitely an Ed Sheeran one.
Okay, so there's something in the zeitgeist about suing people for songs.
Well, actually, the Robin Thicke one would probably be more contemporaneous to what we're talking about in terms of when it came out.
Yeah.
There was a lot of this in the air, basically, at the time. As a final thought for this, having not got anywhere to resolve
God, Robin Thicke sucks. Sorry.
He's a bad man.
It's just a toolbox.
The lyrical plagiarism is blatant.
Yeah.
What about the music? Because I find the music is more interesting because it's much more ambiguous. And then certainly one of the claims Brian McKay's made, he says music and lyrics. So I think the music is mostly referring to the Nomad, which we might touch upon in the Brave New World ep when we get there, but that's
several years away.
Yeah, that is. We'll be very old men by the time we get around to discussing Brave New Worlds. But what about the musical comparisons between Life Shadow and Hallowed Be Thy Name?
I think they're pretty flimsy. I think if you're looking for similarities, you can kind of find some similarities in tone and broadly the chord progressions, but I think they're really fishing at that point.
Yeah, they are fishing, but the fact he's taken the lyrics do make a difference because
if he hadn't taken the lyrics, then you would never consider, oh yes, musically this has taken inspiration from that.
But I do think there are musical motifs in Hallowed Be Thy Name that are definitely inspired by musical ideas in Life Shadow. And to the point where I could almost imagine Steve Harris, this is pure speculation, obviously, but I can almost imagine him playing the riffs to that and the bass and thinking, ooh, I could speed this bit up a bit and add that little bit. And then you've changed it, right? It's his own song. I'm not saying he's ripped the music off, but it's directly inspired and it's in more than one place for me. There's the verse bit, the sort of crescendo bit, and you listen to the songs firstly, listen to Life Shadow, there's almost no guitar in it, right? Particularly, it's mostly strings and an acoustic clean guitar. And tonally, it's completely different. Like, it's in no way a rock song, really, let alone a metal song.
Yeah.
But the musical motifs and things in there, I was like, oh, yeah, I can see. And I would say where Steve has drawn inspiration from. There's nothing musically directly ripped off to my, totally unlegalistic ears. But it is a kind of starting point for what becomes something quite different.
Yeah, I think that's probably valid. I think you could argue it's a musical source of inspiration for a song that musically ends up quite different. And if the lyrics weren't exactly the same, then you wouldn't be making that connection whatsoever.
No, I wouldn't be. I don't know, I might listen to it and think, oh, this kind of reminds me of that little thing in Hallowed Be Thy Name, but only in a kind of faintly that reminds me of.
But in the same way that every metal song ever produced sounds like every metal song.
Well, yeah, but this isn't a metal song, is it? That's the point.
No,
like,
okay.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit different.
The rock, metal, or if we're going to go there, the Western music spectrum, there is only so much combinations of notes and melodies that can be made.
Yeah.
We have very clearly defined scales, clearly defined parameters for music, unless you're playing the coolest shit of freeform jazz. But outside of freeform jazz, it's all 12-bar blues, baby.
But I'm not listening to like Money by Pink Floyd and going, oh yeah, that really reminds me of that bit in Hallowed Be Thy Name. You know what I mean? It's not quite as haphazard as maybe all rock and metal songs. Bum, ba, 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 ba. Yeah, damn.
Speed anything up and it'll sound like Iron Maiden at a certain point.
Well, we're none the wiser there, are we? But
no, we have reached no conclusions here.
Well,
it's almost like we couldn't solve this.
No. I mean, it's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a thing. So, let's move along. After that very satisfying dissection of...
I don't feel satisfied.
So let's look at the singles and the B-side. So the first single from this album, Run to the Hills, with the B-side Total Eclipse. So released in February 1982, so in the run-up to the album coming out.
Yeah.
Maiden's first top 10 single in the UK. Charts at number 7.
Good for them.
Yeah. Has a music video made that goes along with it. The music video is shown in Top of the Pops. Maiden are still having a bit of sulk with Top of the Pops at this point.
Right.
After the fiasco with Running Free, Women in Uniform, where they were yada, yada, yada. But the music video is quite well timed because there's this new thing about called MTV.
Wow, it's weird to hear MTV and think it played music at some point.
And to think it played Iron Maiden videos.
Also, I realise that's a really, really lukewarm take at this point.
Yeah. God, yeah, imagine MTV actually showing music television.
Oh, it sounds like a 50-year-old hair metal fan.
But what Run to the Hills, the obvious choice of first single, right?
Yes.
That's very peasant, yes. And the answer is yes, obviously. The obvious choice of first single.
I mean, it's a banger through and through. The only reason I hesitated is, I guess, if you had Number of the Beast as your lead-off single, it's the album title, and it's fewer connections for the listener to make to the album.
Yeah, possibly. Although, as we'll see, Number of the Beast does well, but
because people are idiots.
Yeah, but but Number of the Beast doesn't do as well as Run to the Hills in terms of the chart.
I mean, it's less of a single song. Right?
Yeah,
Run to the Hills is just a very well constructed. I mean, the hook of the chorus alone is just enough.
And when you think that for most people this is their introduction, because they get this a while before the album comes out, to Bruce era Maiden, it's a really good signal of the change that's happened.
Wow, so Run to the Hills is the first thing you hear post Killer.
Excluding the Maiden Japan EP. So it's the first thing you hear after Paul's left.
Yeah, okay, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah,
because that is quite a huge shift.
Yeah, and also you get one of the most classic metal songs of all time.
Here is an incredible hook of a chorus with the singer that sounds like a freight train screaming.
And also just that chorus where Bruce is so good, or was so good. Sorry, that sounds like this is like a really pointed dig. But he was very good at layering his own vocal harmonies to create those huge walls of sound that obviously become such a power metal trope. But Bruce is just like, it's like Bruce and Freddie Mercury, isn't it, really? People who are able to layer their voice in that way to create those like huge choirs of sound.
Yeah, I mean, none of them on a Hansi Kirsch level, but obviously Hansi gets it from Bruce.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, that is
there are 8,000 layers of vocals. Have at it.
And that was something that Paul, for all his character, just wasn't really capable of.
No, absolutely not.
So you get that real sense of like, oh wow, this is Iron Maiden now, and
it's a huge sound.
Yeah, massive. Before we have a look at Total Eclipse, because it has come up already, hasn't it? The music video. And bear in mind, we don't really get a proper music video for Killers, or for the debut album. We get a music video for Women in Uniform. We get just a live recording of Wrathchild, and that's your lot. Purgatory never gets a video. Then we get the music video for Run to the Hills, the live footage, I believe recorded at the Hammersmith Odeon, interspersed with classic cowboy Western films, we should probably say now, shouldn't we?
It's rubbish.
It is.
And then, I mean, a lot of Maiden videos from this point onwards are pretty rubbish.
I mean, that will be our general synopsis, I think, of most Maiden videos. It's really bad.
And then there's that time in the early noughties, where they replace all the film footage with poorly animated
that Camp
bits.
Chaos stuff,
yeah, and
which is
still
even
rubbish.
worse. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I don't think Iron Maiden, for the most part, did well with videos.
And to be fair, I don't think they cared.
No, potentially not.
I don't mind that.
The next few albums is a good few rubbish videos.
Yeah, you really get the feeling that they honestly couldn't care less, could they? And that's fair enough. You know, you look at a band like, well, their peers in a way, Def Leppard, the way they totally embraced music videos and really saw MTV. Maiden were always a bit more, now we're going to play live and write records. And the record company have told us we have to do this, so meh. But the B-side, Total Eclipse, which is actually one of the rare Maiden B-sides that was played live regularly on a tour.
Oh, really?
It was on the Beast on the Road tour. Total Eclipse was a mainstay of the set list when quite a few songs off the album weren't. And I'm struggling to think of an original Maiden B-side that was played live. I'm not. You'd have to go back to the debut album when you had,
when
like, you know,
sort of
Drifter was
material.
like, it's all a little bit jumbled up. But Total Eclipse definitely was played pretty regularly on that tour.
I mean, it's shocking it's not on the album.
It is shocking.
Obviously, it's on the 90s reissues, the CD versions of the album. But when you have slightly dead weight, like, for instance, Gangland, like, why wouldn't you put Total Eclipse on there instead? It's quite a simple song, and maybe that's why it didn't make the cut, but it's got a good groove to its riff. It's got a memorable chorus. It's got a dramatic build-up. It's quite rousing. It's just a real shame it didn't make the album.
Yeah, and the band acknowledged that was a mistake, and they didn't really seem to have a more plausible explanation. And it
was just a bad call.
It was just a bad call at the time, and the fact that they played it live but didn't play, say, Gangland or Invaders, would suggest they realised that mistake quite early on.
Yeah.
That by the time they got to touring the album, they were like,
guys,
they should have
come on,
put that on the record. I think Steve, I'm sure I heard Steve say something along the lines of the fact that Clive Burr had a writing credit on Gangland. They sort of wanted to give him his moment, and that's quite sweet. That's nice.
That is quite sweet, but also the wrong call.
Yeah, it is the wrong call, but given, well, what we'll go on, we'll discuss happens to Clive, it's nice that he's got a writing credit on a Maiden album.
It's a good gesture.
Yeah. And so the only other single we get off this record is Number of the Beast, which follows the album. So you've got Run to the Hills, the lead-in single, Hype People Up, and Number of the Beast, the kind of keep the momentum going single, released April 1982. B-side, Remember Tomorrow Live.
With Bruce?
You with Bruce? Yeah, have you heard this?
No, I don't think I have, actually.
Well, I tell you what, Sam, I've got a reissue of this from around 2005. I believe it's a picture disc. You know what?
I literally have this picture disc downstairs in this house.
And you've not listened to the B-side?
I must have at some point.
Oh, hang on. That might be the live version on that might be from the early days tour, actually.
Yeah.
But I do have this as well.
Because it's 2005, and I think it is a 21st century live version.
Well, yeah, this live version was recorded at one of Bruce's first shows, those warm-up shows he did to the band in Italy. So it's one of the first, like, officially done live recordings. And what is, well, tantalising for Maiden nerds like me is, did they record the whole show? It seems odd, isn't it? That it's like a soundboard recording for a B-side.
Yeah, they would have recorded the whole show.
Yeah, why have they not put it out?
Because
I want it.
For whatever reason, it didn't meet their quality standards.
But it's a set of Maiden playing Paul Di'Anno material with Bruce singing. How cool is that? I mean, that's basically the entire set of Paul songs of Bruce's voice.
If you're going to pull out that thread, the amount of bands with so much live material just in their archives because they've recorded shows off the sound desk and have just kept them with the original intention of, maybe we'll do something with this at some point, and they just never did.
I
imagine Maiden just have vaults upon vaults of that kind of stuff.
And I have a sneaky suspicion that this is their retirement fund. Honestly, because there's a lot of live stuff filmed as well that they've said, we're doing this for the new DVD, and those things haven't transpired. I reckon when Maiden stop touring, nerds like me are just going to be inundated with a ton of box sets, and I hope so. Take my money, Iron Maiden. I will buy everything, like all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. There'll be a bunch of whales like yourself.
Oh yeah. But anyway, Number of the Beast charts at number 18, which is still a top 20 single from a heavy metal band.
Yeah.
So
82 UK, that's impressive.
Yeah, very impressive indeed. So going on then to the critical reception of this record. Let's begin with what the band members think of it, or at the very least what Steve Harris thinks of it.
That's not a critical reception.
Well, okay.
That is
he's
an uncritical reception.
It's a self.
Oh, bloody love the album.
Well,
it's my best yet.
Well, wait. It's a self-critical reception. Steve Harris quoted Mick Wall's Maiden biography.
I wish I hadn't stolen those Beckett lyrics.
You probably just think that, yeah. He says, in hindsight, that was a very expensive mistake.
Oh, it's been a right bloody headache.
He says, I didn't think it was our best album at the time, and I still don't.
What?
I love that response. Like, what the hell,
the
Steve?
other two albums, Steve?
You high. Yeah,
So
Steve Harris is...
an idiot?
Well...
no offense, Steve. I do love you.
I think maybe, and other
Please
things...
come on the podcast.
I think he's quite a bad... incredibly talented man, quite a bad judge of his own material.
I mean, that does explain the last 15 years of Iron Maiden records.
Steady. Not 15.
15.
No.
Yeah, 15.
Not having that. But yeah, so Steve, for reasons he doesn't quite elaborate on, it says it's a good album and he's proud of it, but not even at the time he didn't think it was their best, and he still doesn't. The contemporary reception...
I don't know what to do with that. That's such a...
It's very odd, isn't it? Yeah. The rest of the band seem to really, love the record.
Well, why wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, come on,
It is the best thing they've done.
Yeah, no spoilers. At this point, yeah. And, well, some people would say forever. Looking at the contemporary reviews...
Some people would be wrong.
Yeah, they would be wrong. But it's quite hard to find contemporary reviews of Maiden albums from the time. So
yeah.
If you're listening to this and you happen to have a stack of old copies of Sounds or Kerrang and fancy tweeting us at MaidenPod or an email, maidenvoyagerspodcast@gmail.com.
Don't send us an email. No one's checking the account.
I mean, basically, I really want to see those reviews. Like for this album or any album, please share them and we'll...
Send to P.O. Box 11.
You can fax us. But yeah, we'll give you a shout out and nothing more. Well,
that's a compelling offer.
It is. Come on, who can resist that?
Everyone.
But in Sounds magazine, it got given the full rating, 5 stars, and it was compared to Deep Purple's In Rock. Now, not stylistically, I don't think. I think where they're getting at that is In Rock by Deep Purple was the first album to feature Ian Gillan and Roger Glover. So it was Deep Purple, the Mark II, what became the classic lineup. And there's a sense that even at the time, people were saying, now we've arrived at the classic lineup.
I see. Okay.
Which is interesting that people recognise that or seem to be suggesting that at the time. Like when Number of the Beast comes out, there's this realisation from at least a lot of people in the press. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. This is the classic Maiden lineup. So it's not even just a retrospective thing.
That's interesting, yeah.
And such is the success of this album, they're even invited to do a cover feature for NME, who even back then were notoriously snooty about all things rock and metal. So it's taking Maiden to places, to media outlets that really wouldn't have touched them were it not to disparage them before. Retrospectively, I have gone through all the lists, right? Best metal albums of all time from the metal publications, but also the mainstream ones, Rolling Stone and any big metal publication you care to name.
Yeah.
You can pretty much guarantee Number of the Beast is in the top 5. Pretty much guarantee in every single one of them. Now, I was just going to read out a bunch of publications and numbers, but what's the point?
Don't do that.
What is
People have the internet.
Yeah, exactly. If you're curious to know, you can look it up, right? But it's guaranteed to be in the top 5. What do you think of the other big hitters that are probably in that top 5? By the way, it's rarely number 1. Okay, actually, I don't think I've seen a big publication put it at number 1.
When we say metal, how broad are we speaking?
Heavy metal.
That was not helpful. Okay, there'll be a Metallica album in there.
Yeah, usually Master of Puppets.
Yeah. Then I would assume Priest would make a top 5.
Yeah, usually British Steel's in there.
Oh, I wouldn't have picked British Steel.
No, but you know what I mean. If you're writing for Rolling Stone, it's the obvious one, isn't it?
Yeah,
or
but
one of those publications.
Boring. let's go for Screaming.
I can't even get into the conversation. British Steel isn't my favourite Priest album, but boring.
It's a good album, but compared to Screaming for Vengeance or Painkiller, let's not get into this.
Dear God, all right, okay.
I would have put Painkiller, that's all I'm saying.
So those are two. What other one do you think is a biggie?
Who else is a metal musician? I mean, obviously anyone should be putting in Halloween Keepers, but I don't think that's making most people's top fives because they're scum.
There's quite a big important metal band you're missing here.
Is there?
Yeah. Sometimes considered not
Oh,
sometimes.
Sabbath, right?
Yeah, so Paranoid by Black Sabbath is almost always in there as well.
Yeah, which is a fantastic album. Yeah.
So it's usually basically those 4 albums, and then you might chuck in Rain and Blood, or there's another. But it's those albums that tend to be jostling out in that top 5.
Okay.
So pretty much believing the critics, the unanimous consensus here is that we are dealing with one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we'll get to our thoughts on that, I guess. But let's have a look at how it did at the charts when it was released. Now, do you know where Number of the Beast charted? You may well do. In the UK.
10.
Oh, get out of town, Sam. Number 1.
What?
Yeah, one of a handful of Iron Maiden number 1 albums in the UK.
Wow.
Number of the Beast is their first number 1 album. Straight in the charts at number 1 as well.
I just assumed Maiden didn't start getting number 1 albums until the 21st century and people had stopped buying albums other than Iron Maiden.
Well, no, this is the thing. This album is genuinely a game changer for the band.
Wow.
Like, critically and commercially, it puts them on a totally different footing and level compared to where they'd been. And bear in mind, they were a very successful band. By any measure.
Number 1 in the album charts in 1982 is a different level.
Yeah, and that is a huge achievement when there were very few heavy metal bands who had ever achieved a number 1 album in the UK. We're not talking in 1982, I'm talking ever, right? That is almost unprecedented. And yet, there at Iron Maiden, number 1 album, with an album that has a cover like that as well. It's like...
It's pretty cool.
I'm looking at the chart listing, and, feel free to go on the historic chart album website, and you just look at... It's fun.
That's your job.
Yeah, it's a good way to while away your time when you should be attending to other responsibilities.
Like your child.
Like my child. My job. Working on myself. I
don't think you've attended to working on yourself for 30-odd years.
And now is not the time to start. So, but you look at the other album covers, and we'll consider what else is there. But it just stands out like such a sore thumb.
So what else is in that top 10?
I was going to ask you, Sam. Do you want to?
Oh dear.
And I'll be honest with you. If you guess any of these, we've had some quite good top 10s looking at Killers and Iron Maiden. There's some other quite good stuff in the charts. I would say that the week this came out is not a vintage week for music, but there are some big names here.
It's too early 80s for me to even really hazard a guess.
Okay, so number 2, you've got Love Songs by Barbra Streisand.
Okay.
Big names. Number 3, you've got an album called Pelican West by Haircut 100.
Sure.
Number 4, you've got James Bond's Greatest Hits by various artists.
By James Bond.
James Bond sings the greatest hits of James Bond.
Now that I would listen to.
Trying to think, I think it was still Roger Moore as James Bond in 82. That'd be good. Rest in peace, Roger Moore. Number 5, All for a Song by Barbara Dickson.
Sure.
Number 6, The Gift by Jam. I presume that's The Jam, that should be.
Must be The Jam.
The Jam.
Maybe they didn't have an article at that point.
Quite possibly. It's this band have come up before, who I should probably check out. Number 7, an album called Sky 4, forthcoming by the band Sky.
Sky?
Yeah, they've been in our top 10s before, Sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really bothered the charts in the in the early 80s. And yet I've never heard of them. Then we've got Begin the Big Wine by Julio Iglesias.
Julio Iglesias. I believe father of Enrique Iglesias.
Ah.
I might have made that up on the basis of the surname.
It makes
I will
sense.
fact check that at some
It
point.
makes sense. Number 9, you've got the Anvil by Visage. They're like 80.
By Anvil.
The Anvil by Anvil. But Anvil were not getting into the UK top 10. That's
They never will.
So Visage were like an 80s electro pop band, weren't they, I think. And then number 10, you've got 5 Miles Out by Mike Oldfield. Now,
okay.
Yeah, decent. Now, I wouldn't usually stray beyond the top 10, but number 11 is a great album, Blackout by Scorpions.
Never heard it.
Probably my favourite Scorpions album. Great Blackout.
I don't think I've ever listened to a whole Scorpions album.
Well, Blackout. That's the one.
All right.
Blackout.
Oh, well, now I'm sold.
Really had a blackout.
So is it just a song about a power cut? Get your candles out!
I think it's about someone having a sort
Is
of...
Grandma okay? Let her know.
I'm probably doesn't really pay to delve too deeply into the lyrics of Scorpions, but good album.
I feel like that's a fool's game.
Now, usually we wouldn't necessarily go around the world in terms of the charts at this point, but it's worth noting how it does in America, because in America it peaks at 33 on the Billboard chart, which so far eclipses what they've done. I don't think the debut album charts at all in America. I think Killers scrapes into the top 100. So to go from that to 33...
It's quite a jump.
It's a big jump. And also it sells infinitely... Well, obviously not infinitely more copies, but it sells...
It just wouldn't stop selling. They couldn't produce enough.
They basically evaporated into thin air. But it sells far, far more copies in the States than both their first 2 albums combined.
Yeah.
And is a really genuinely big hit in America, which is the first time the band really begin to, actually seriously think, we're going to, we could be breaking. And Iron Maiden always have quite an uneasy relationship. They still have an uneasy relationship with the USA anyway, I think.
Yeah.
But it seems like things are really turning for them there. To date, apparently, so recording in 2022, the album Number of the Beast, according to one source, I believe it's the Financial Times, has sold around 20 million copies.
Why is the Financial Times reporting on the sales of Number of Beast?
I don't. Because it's the Financial Times, Sam. They like money and numbers.
I guess they do like money and numbers, but do they like Iron Maiden?
They must have done a few. It's notoriously difficult when albums are that old with so many territories to compile an accurate figure of exact sales, but that seemed to be the best I can get. Which
it sold 11 billion copies.
Yeah, but it puts that album, in the world of metal. There's very few albums.
It's very big.
Yeah, that go on to do that.
It's not the Black Album big, but it's big.
But that's also worth noting, I think, because it is very big, but it's not Back in Black, Hysteria, Black Album big.
Yeah.
So it's massive.
Oh, Hysteria.
No, we're not. No.
Stay what an album.
On Message Sam, Iron Maiden podcast. Stop thinking about Hysteria. Stop it. But it's... I think if you have an album like that, and I mean Back in Black album, you're pretty much set, right? It doesn't really matter what you do from that point on.
You're
huge
established
forever. And Maiden are big, but they can't rest on their laurels.
Yeah.
They haven't got that, I don't know what you want to call it, like a nest egg, a cushion, something soft and fluffy that they can just recline
safety
on.
Net. I think safety
net is the word,
for,
yeah.
not nest egg.
But they are one of the biggest metal bands in the world off the back of this album.
Yeah.
But they haven't reached that stratospheric level that means, cool, fine. We can take 5 years between recording albums, and it doesn't even matter if they're good or not anymore, because we'll still play to stadiums wherever we go.
It's still record, tour extensively, record immediately, tour extensively.
Yeah. So, as we'll see next episode. So commercially, massive, just big.
Done good.
Big numbers. So bringing it home, we've got Man of the Match first off, and I've not actually had time to think about this, so I'm going to let you go first.
It's obviously Bruce.
Okay, yeah.
What a strong opening gambit of an album for Bruce. You have performances like you already mentioned, like Run to the Hills, with that sort of incredible vocal melody that could only really be pulled off by someone with such a strong voice. And then you have stuff like lyrical plagiarism aside, Hallowed Be Thy Name is such an amazing performance across the board. Yeah, it's Bruce.
Yeah,
he allegedly didn't write anything, although he probably did.
Yeah, he probably did, yeah. I mean, well, yeah, I'm sold, actually. I've not thought about it. Yeah, I think that's 2 out of 2 for Bruce. Yeah, I think you're right. He's not the only thing here, but because I think...
it's all the elements together.
Yeah, it is.
When I think Number of the Beast, I think Bruce's voice.
Yeah, and there is that subtle change in direction of the band's songwriting, but in a way that's the sort of kind of because they know they've got Bruce.
It's enabled by his voice.
Yeah, exactly.
His vocal ability allows Iron Maiden to evolve in a way they couldn't have dreamed of before.
And perhaps that's the thing, even though he doesn't officially have writing credits, without him, you couldn't have this album.
Exactly.
So, yeah, 2 out of 2 for Bruce Dickinson. Man of the match. Best of the Beast and worst of the rest. So when it comes to the tracks, one track you can keep. If you can only keep one track, you have to bin.
I'll let you go first, because I'm undecided right now.
Yeah, I
forgot to think about this.
Yeah, and I've also forgot to think about this. I'm torn between 2 quite different songs for my Best of the Beast. Hallowed Be Thy Name is kind of the obvious contender. And if I'm being objective about it, if someone said, what is the best song on this album, I would say, well, it's probably Hallowed Be Thy Name. If someone said what my favourite song is, I do really like 22 Acacia Avenue.
Yeah, it is a fantastic song. And as I already waxed lyrical about
there's something about it because the band very rarely, well, they just don't play it live at all, really, in the last 20 years or so.
Are you saying it's the connoisseur's choice?
Well, but it's the sort of elusive...
On this extremely successful, broadly known album.
Yes, on this very well-known album. And I was listening to Live After Death the other day, and they were still playing 22 Acacia Avenue then, and it made me feel very... There is that German word about for being nostalgic for a time you didn't live in, isn't there? But a note for that for Pedant's Corner next week.
That word.
Yeah, that word, I just felt... So you know what? If I could keep one, I've heard Hallowed Be Thy Name enough. Not like enough that means I'm bored of it, but I'm happy with that. 22 Acacia Avenue. Is my best.
What would you lose? I assume it's either Invaders or Gangland.
It is obviously either Invaders or Gangland. Yeah. And if you'd have asked me this before I started, I always thought it was Invaders. But actually going back to this in the run-up for this, I had more warmth to Invaders than I thought I did.
Yeah.
It is much of muchness, but I would just about lose Gangland, I think.
I think I'm with you there. I think, as we kind of already discussed, although Invaders is not up to scratch with the rest of the album, it's an interesting bit of connective tissue between the Iron Maiden of old and the Iron Maiden that does the rest of Number of the Beast. And it's quite a fun, ballsy opening.
Yeah.
Whereas Gangland just... it's a real flat note on an album of otherwise highs.
It is, and it sits in one of the best, if you're thinking old money vinyl, it sits on one of the best sides of metal in history. Right? Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, Hallowed Be Thy Name, Gangland. I mean, it's just as well...
Swing and a miss.
Yeah, it's just as well Hallowed Be Thy Name is so great that it can pick you up straight away.
Yeah.
Because otherwise that could be a massive come down. But it sort of gets a pass. I mean, well, we'll get onto the rating and ranking, but yeah, I don't think either of them are bad songs particularly. It's just they sit in such an illustrious company, don't they?
Yeah, it's relative to the rest of the album. Gangland is a perfectly serviceable song, but yeah, it just doesn't live up to the rest.
So, go on. Best of the Beast, worst of the rest. Well, you're saying Gangland is your worst?
Gangland's my worst. So my best is... I would be inclined to say Hallowed Be Thy Name, but actually I am going to go Number of the Beast. Because I love how it starts off so much. And we already talked about those opening 2 minutes of the song. And I just think it's such an incredible build-up. It's the kind of song that even now when I hear it, there's a warmth and energy and something mystical about it that just pulls me straight in. It is like the best storyteller telling the best ghost story at a campfire with guitars.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I'm going to let you in a little secret. If Gangland and Invaders are my least favourite songs, Number of the Beast would be the next least favourite.
You are a piece of shit.
Yeah.
That is unacceptable.
Don't get me wrong, there's a massive gulf between Number of the Beast and Invaders and Gangland, but...
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, and me, but I surprise myself. It's one of those songs that I like. I like Number of the Beast. Just for the record, for the Maiden pod, like, I do really like Number of the Beast.
Get him.
But I always
Troll him.
I always feel like I should like it more than I do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh, I really like it. I'm not wild for it.
Weirdly, as a song, I do think it kind of drags a bit. Just very lengthy solo section, slightly outstays its welcome, but then it has a really satisfying end. And I just think that start is so strong. It sums up what Bruce Dickinson can do for the band more than any of the other tracks, because there's so much emotive delivery to what he does. And I don't mean that in, like, it's really deep and I felt really sad afterwards. I just mean it's captivating performance-wise. It's great.
Yeah, no, I do really like it. It's just for whatever reason, it's one of those things that, yeah, I sort of feel like I should like it more than I do. But yeah, no, I like it. No,
well, I'm going to say it now. You shouldn't have to like anything, any level. It's all opinions. It's all subjective. Nor anyone who says otherwise, they're wrong.
Yeah, and I agree. But you know, it's one of those things that clearly it's so beloved amongst Maiden fans. I always think, there's something I'm not quite... Or there's something I'm slightly missing out on here for the song I really like that other people adore. You know, and it is like shades of affection, I guess. But yeah,
but you like what you like, right?
Indeed.
For all the jokes I'll make about disagreeing with you, ultimately it's far more interesting to like what you enjoy, rather than going with a herd.
When it comes to Maiden in singles mode, I was really... I know I said it comes down to 22 Acacia Avenue or Hallowed Be Thy Name. Run to the Hills is a very strong contender for me. I know it's like Route 1 Maiden, but
Run to the Hills is
really
like such
good.
an archetypal microcosm of Maiden at their best.
Yeah.
So it would be a fair choice.
Then let's end as is customary, as is the format, as is tradition at this point. With
Tradition's a strong word.
Format's
a strong word, to be honest.
Where we rate and rank. And so this will give us 3 albums to position.
Yeah.
2 previous ratings to consider. What are you thinking, Sam? Do you want to go first? Do your rating and your ranking?
Yeah, it's an 8.5.
Wow, okay.
But 8.5 is very, very, very good.
It is very good.
No, it's very, very, very good.
Okay. Is it one of the 5 best metal albums of all time good?
Well, it depends what you're considering, right? I think in objective terms, yes, Number of the Beast is probably one of the top 5 metal albums ever released. But in subjective Sam terms, it's not my favourite Iron Maiden album.
Fair enough.
So I need room to grow.
Yeah. well, my thinking is, so we're going for 8.5. My thinking is my favourite Iron Maiden album, maybe my 2 favourite Iron Maiden albums are 10s. Right, and I find it hard to split between them.
I very, very rarely give anything a 10 unless it's Keeper of the Seven Keys.
I just think if I can't give my favourite albums by my favourite band a 10, then the system is somewhat flawed, right? If they're not
clearly
10s,
you have never been a music critic.
If they're not 10s, then what is? But this is one of my favourite, but it's not my favourite album by Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
But it is right up there. And I believe I gave the debut album 9.
Yes, I think you did. And then you got very pissy at me for giving it 7.5.
Yeah, well, I mean, that in a way, I find that more objectionable than giving this an 8.5. So I'm going to give this a...
What did we say about opinions not being wrong?
Yeah, jury's out. I'm going to give this a 9.5.
Ooh, wow, spicy.
Yeah, I'm taking away 0.5 for primarily Gangland, which is just...
Yeah.
But again, objectively, it's a good enough song, right?
Yeah.
In a way, I think more the reason I've deducted that 0.5, and there will be at least a couple of 10s coming up. Let me tell you that now, at least a couple. The reason this loses the 0.5, Gangland, and the track listing always...
The running order is odd.
It is off.
And like we touched on that before, and I think part of the reason why this doesn't go higher than 8.5 for me is the flow of the album isn't great. Individual tracks are fantastic, but considering the sort of narrative journeys of individual songs on the album, the actual cohesive album as a whole kind of jumps around the place a bit. And like Gangland is a great example of just pace and momentum being like thrown out the window. Whereas if I think of, I struggle to think of any 10 out of 10 albums because I'm bitter and jaded. But if I think of like my all-time favorite albums, for me, everything effortlessly and seamlessly flows together.
Yeah.
Number of the Beast has a few jarring moments, even though it's all good.
Yeah, exactly right. And, we already mentioned Children of the Dam feels like an odd track too.
It's a weird track too. It's a fantastic song and one of my favourite on the album. But
yeah, so, but, like a very strong showing for Number of the Beast there. 8.5 and 9.5. So the ranking, I mean, at this point, it's still pretty self-evident, isn't it?
There's 3 albums.
So, number 1... Well, let's take it in turns, although they will be exactly the same at this point in time, I presume. So for me, number 1, Number of the Beast. I think the difference here is that for me, I think, well, for you, rather,
this is agonising.
There is going to be I get a feeling for you, there's quite a big gulf between Number of the Beast and the rest. Is that fair?
I think there's a big gulf between Number of the Beast and Killers. I think there is a medium gulf between Number of the Beast and Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden is a really good album. It's just not what I want from Iron Maiden.
Yeah, but for me, I think it's obviously Number of the Beast is going in the number 1 spot in my ranking.
Yeah.
It's really close to the debut for me because I do love that debut album so much, and there's not a lot in it, but the debut is just about coming second, and then Killers, which is great, but that's the easiest one for me to place. I feel there have been times in my life where I would have maybe put the debut above Number of the Beast. But,
that's fair.
Today...
Yeah, I think from my side, like, before Number of the Beast, the 2 albums are good, really good in many ways, but broadly just, they don't quite resonate in the way that Number of the Beast does.
Mm.
And you're right in some ways that Number of the Beast is a definite just step up in my estimations for what Iron Maiden can do.
And for the sake of completion, your ranking is the same as mine, isn't it?
Obviously.
Excellent. Good. Just to give it a nice
I'm not
rounded
putting
feeling.
Killers as number 2.
What a big shock. Like, oh my God, Killers is actually my number 1 Maiden album. Oh, come on. It's good.
Yeah, but anyone picking that as their number 1 Maiden album is just trying to be edgy.
Yeah, no.
Dom Lawson.
I'm with you there.
Please. I love you, Dom. Please don't hurt me.
So, I guess that concludes this week's episode. I feel like it's the podcast thing to do at this point, to tell people to like and subscribe.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how podcasts work, but if you can, like and subscribe, follow us on Twitter at
MaidenPod,
which I always forget. Thank you,
and
Blev.
I still can't believe we've got that.
Yeah, it's shocking. Don't email us. Don't ever email us.
No, please do email us at maidenvoyagerspodcast@gmail.com. The lengthier, the better. Lots of attachments, various bits of Maiden trivia. Stories about, we want to see, have you seen the members of Iron Maiden out in the wild? Not gigs, that's boring. We've all seen them at gigs.
Have you seen them at gigs? I've not seen them at gigs.
Well, no, I've seen them at their own gigs.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, we've all seen them at their own gigs. I thought you meant like you were watching, I don't know, Man or something, and Steve Harris is in the background.
I mean, I know, if you've done that, definitely email us.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, did you see Bruce Dickinson and the Weatherspoons? Let us know.
Did you see Steve Harris at the back of a Beckett gig furiously scribbling some lyrics down?
Have you seen Yannick Kers waiting to get his tyres changed at mechanics? Let us know.
Have you seen Bruce Dickinson fly off the handle at a service station attendee when he couldn't fill up his petrol in his car?
What is Bruce Dickinson?
I'm not saying he's done this.
Is he getting his car filled in deep South America or something? Why is there an attendant at the petrol station filling his car?
I don't know. Maybe there was just an issue somewhere around the back of Hereford's service station. I don't know.
Bruce was on his way back from a cider festival and he needed someone to fill his car for him.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, over and out, I guess.
Yeah.
Bye.